Hello everyone, and welcome to the June edition of the Farmers Supply Association Agriculture Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmers Supply Association. Well, the battle continues, and the battle I'm talking about is one we've been talking about all year, and that's trying to get this 2019 crop planted. It's just been, as we've talked many times, been a wet year. We've had 70 days in the first 5 months of this year with at least some rainfall on them, so that averages 14 days a month with rain. 35 inches roughly in that amount of time, so that's 7 inches a month. So you can see why it's been really difficult to get this crop planted. We're making a lot of progress. I've talked in a previous program or two about getting 2 or 3 days at a time to plant. Those intervals have widened a little bit. We're getting sometimes some 5-7 day intervals recently, so that's made us make some progress in planting. Of course, the guys that are near rivers, near streams and things like that, where water's backed out, it's a little more difficult for them. But for the guys that aren't, we've been getting some dry spells to get some things done, so we're making some progress. Rice planting is pretty much about over now. We're taping on June 6th, and there was actually some rice planted on June 5th in Jackson County, so still a little bit of rice planting going on, but that should end this week. A lot of people wanting to know how much rice has gone unplanted this year, and it looks like we're probably, some of the estimates I'm seeing, around 20 to 25% of the acreage in our area will not be planted. I mean, that's just a wild guess, or an educated guess instead of a wild guess. But anyway, a lot of rice is going to go unplanted, and that's kind of unprecedented, at least for a while in this area. What I want to do this month is just talk, I'll give a couple of items in relation to rice, the production practices going on right now, and also talk a little bit about soybeans and some things going on with that. Again, the rice crop varies considerably. It varies from just planted, as I said, June 5th, and maybe even some after that, but rice planted on June 5th, to like the field behind me that's flooded. This is the same field that we taped at last month, and you might remember the rice was very small at that time, certainly unflooded, but a lot of progress has been made out here. This is the Clearfield 153 variety out here, our weed control program. You can see the field's very clean. It's been Command pre-emerge, followed by New Path plus Command early post-emergence, and then before the flood, I'm not sure if it was a Clear Path or New Path, but either New Path or Clear Path plus Prowl before the flood, along with some Gambit for the nutsedge around here. So the field's very clean. You can see the fertilizer is kicked in. The water's out here, and this has this dark green color, so we're really kicking off and going. Just want to talk about the weed control situation this year. As I mentioned last time, the residual herbicides just worked outstanding this year with all the rain. The rain's had a lot of bad points, but the activity of the residual herbicides has been outstanding. So we've had a lot of clean fields. Recently, some of these residual herbicides have started breaking, especially as the fields have dried out and the residual herbicides have been out there, 3+ weeks, they start breaking. So we're starting to get some, in some of these fields, some grass breakthroughs, and we're getting into that period that I call the post-emergence herbicide Russian roulette. And what I mean by that is we can make good recommendations on these post-emergence herbicides, but that doesn't mean they're going to work. We're in danger of bad things happening with these herbicides. A couple of reasons for that. Number one is resistance to a lot of these families of herbicides. Propanil, Facet, the ALS herbicides like New Path, Regiment, Grasp, also the ACC ACACE inhibitors like Rice Star and Clincher. We've got documented resistance to all of those families of herbicides, and that makes it a guessing game on whether or not those grass herbicides are going to work when we recommend them and put them out here. So that makes it it's tough for the farmers, it's tough for the consultants, field men, guys like me. We make recommendations and we don't have a lot of confidence that they're going to work a lot of times, but anyway, all you can do is make a good recommendation and go on. Also, environmental issues, different things like that, getting fields sprayed in a timely manner are also an issue on these, trying to kill these grasses post-emergence. I'd like to talk about some of the things I've seen that have worked this year and in years past in some of these situations. For barnyard grass, I've had some good luck with Rice Star, especially if the fields are muddy when you spray them. I've had some farmers kill some pretty good sized rice star this year, and pretty good sized grass this year with rice star. So, you know, that's one of those things we can look at on some grass escapes. Again, especially if we have really good wet conditions when we spray. Broadleaf signal grass, one of my favorite things with broadleaf signal grass is facet. And facet may not kill broadleaf signal grass right away, but if you'll put facet on it, you'll see it sit on that grass. Then when you put the flood on it, it'll finish it off. So I absolutely love facet on broadleaf signal grass, so that's an option right there if that's, you know, one of your grass escapes. Finally, with Springletop, probably the best choice there would be rice star. It's really about the only choice once it gets some size on it, so that's another thing to think about. Again, with the bigger Springletop is to use rice star on that, again with the muddy conditions. So those are some things to think about if you have some of these grass escapes, depending on what the grass is and what you can use. You know, propanil, STAM, whichever formulation you want to use, still has a place in rice weed control. But there's, you know, barnyard grass is mostly resistant to propanil, so that makes that a hard sell by itself. But propanil in a program and mixed with other chemicals seems to enhance them, so it still has a place, but just not a standalone herbicide by itself, especially on bigger grasses. So that's kind of where we're at with weed control. I'd like to switch to fertilize or nitrogen fertilization now. I think we've done pretty well this year on getting our nitrogen fertilizer out on dry ground. You know, that's the key to efficiency with urea, is to get that nitrogen out on dry ground and then get the flood water across it in a timely manner, and your nitrogen use will be very efficient. So even though we've had the wet spring, it seemed like recently we've had some dry windows to get this fertilizer on dry ground. So you can see how dark this field is. I think that just shows that the fertilizer use has been real efficient out here. So hopefully that pattern will stay where we'll have those dry windows to get this fertilizer out on dry ground. A couple of things we need to remember on nitrogen fertilization. First, the 3-week rule, and this is something pretty new that the University of Arkansas researchers have found. From the time you put that big shot of nitrogen out, you need to wait at least 3 weeks before, even if your field gets to 1/2-inch internode or internode elongation, before that 3 weeks is up, you need to wait at least 3 weeks to get that mid-season fertilizer out there. The reason for that, it takes at least that long to get this uptake of this early application. So wait at least 3 weeks, and probably 4 to 5 weeks might even be better. So remember that, I just call it the 3-week rule, and don't put that fertilizer out there too quick at mid-season, even though the plant may show the internode elongation and thinking you need it. Let's have an internode elongation and at least 3 weeks from that earlier application. Another thing, if you're putting out larger than recommended rates of nitrogen out here, you might want to think about using the Green Seeker program, and if you want to do that, I'd be glad to work with you, our customers, on that. And with that, we need to put a reference plot out along with that pre-flood nitrogen. So if you're thinking about that, and I think the big place for that is where you put higher than recommended rates out there, you might not need any mid-season fertilizer, but the only way you'll know for sure is if you've got that great reference plot out there, and I can bring that handheld Green Seeker unit out to the field and we can look at that and see if you need it or not. Finally, soybeans, where we're at with soybeans. Well, just like with rice, we're late with soybeans, very late with soybeans. We like to get soybeans planted in April, and we haven't been able to do that this year. So getting a lot of ground worked. Again, as we tape in early June, a lot of our ground is just now getting worked. A lot of it's, you know, kind of weeded over and a lot of grass and weeds in it. So we're trying to get these fields worked up. Consequently, we lose moisture when we're trying to work these fields up, you know, with the hot weather and the winds blowing like that. So we're probably going to need a rain to get some moisture on some of these fields to get them planted, to get the moisture we need for planting. As far as weed control, pigweeds are the big weed we need to think about as far as soybeans. So there's 3 things we need to remember. Start clean, whether it takes tillage, whether it takes a herbicide application. Make sure all those pigweeds are controlled before you plant the soybeans out there. I think one good thing about having to till this late this year, it's not good overall, but we are getting to destroy some of these pigweeds through tillage instead of using chemicals for everything, so that kind of helps break that chemical cycle. So I think that is one good thing. We're controlling these pigweeds that are emerged with tillage, and that helps quite a bit. After starting clean, you need to overlap your residuals, and after overlapping residuals, you need to make timely post applications. So those are the keys to making soybean pigweed control work in soybeans. And hopefully we'll have a clean crop this year, kind of like we've had with our rice. We're getting off to a good start weed control wise in rice, and hopefully we'll get that in soybeans as well. Until next month, if you have any questions, you can contact me through Farmers Supply Association. And this has been Randy Kopechka with your Farmers Supply Association Agriculture Report for June.